Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad you're here. I often tell this story about learned helplessness that has to do with fleas. And if you followed me for any length of time, read any of my books, you probably have heard the flea story. But it's important to know that the concept of learned helplessness, or this idea that obstacles don't no longer exist, they are gone, and now you have the agency to move forward despite whatever might have happened to you in the past. This concept is actually taught using humans, dogs, elephants, and yesterday I learned that there's even an experiment with sharks, that if there's a place where you can go see sharks swimming with fish and the shark are not eating the fish, but there used to be an invisible barrier and the sharks hit their would like try to attack the fish, and then they'd run into that barrier, and then over time they stopped. Now the barrier is no longer there, and they will never try to eat those fish. But the problem with telling the story around learned helplessness and using any animal or insect that people value will end you up in discussion and conversation about how wrong it is to willfully put systems in the way to prevent folks from moving forward. Here's what I mean. Circus elephants are trained by tying them to a rope. When they are young calves, they will try as hard as they can to get away. And then at about 6 weeks, just at the point when they have the strength to break the rope or break the chain, they will stop trying. Do they have the physical strength? Yes. Do they have the ability? Yes. Did they try really hard in the past and fail? Yes. And that is the key and why they never try ever again. That's why you see elephants that weigh tons being held by one little small tether, and you might be wondering why they don't try to get away. But you tell that story and you let somebody be in the audience that is an animal lover, a PETA supporter, someone who cares about elephants, and they'll say, that is wrong. You shouldn't do that to elephants. But the flea story, I have yet to have anyone come to me and say, oh my gosh, Nicole, I can't believe people do that to fleas. And I think that's telling. I think it shares or should give us some insight about why we put systems and structures on certain people and not other people. Value and where we assign human dignity has a large part to do with it. But if I put fleas in this glass, they will all jump out. But if I put fleas in this glass and I put a lid on this glass, those fleas will jump up and hit their bodies against that lid until they realize it hurts. And then they will start to jump just below the lid. And then you can take the lid off and those fleas will never jump out of that glass. Do they have the ability? Absolutely, they do. Absolutely, they do. But why don't those fleas jump out of that glass? Because they have learned to be helpless. They have been conditioned. They have been trained, right? And humans are also like fleas in a lot of ways. But what I was rejecting when I found out this newer information was this idea that people in general are just imagining obstacles that don't exist, that they have the ability, the capability, the power, the agency to jump out, to get beyond their circumstances, no matter what. And so Martin Seligman is the person who shared this study the first time I saw it. But then I went back and I said, let me do a reverse bibliography. Let me see who Seligman studied. And he studied this gentleman named C.H. Turner. And C.H. Turner in 1910 studied the behavior of insects and ants, or something other than spiders. I can't actually remember. And Dr. Turner actually broke the glass, and the fleas never jumped out of the shape of the glass. And I think what's interesting about those fleas never even jumping out of the shape of the glass after being exposed to this shape is that even the offspring of those fleas, once this glass is broken, still will not jump out of the shape of the glass. So what does that look like 2 or 3 or 4 generations removed when you have fleas that have never been exposed to glasses and lids, living alongside, working alongside, loving fleas that have been exposed to glasses and lids? What kinds of things do we say about them? I asked this question yesterday, and some folks said, we'll call them lazy. We'll say they, don't care to do any better. We wonder what's wrong with them. But on my ride home, I came to a realization. And that realization was that most of the time when I am telling the Flea story, folks are thinking about marginalized people. They're thinking that the folks that we need to compare to fleas are the Black folks in the world, the poor people in the world, the young people, the gay people, the folks who live in areas where they don't have access to resources. They think that it is every marginalized group around. But what if the fleas are not the ones who are marginalized? What if the fleas are the people in power? What if these limiting beliefs, these positions of learned helplessness are a reflection of the fragility in the people in power? What if it's rich people who have a limiting belief that thinks that there's a scarcity mentality, that there's not enough to go around? What if poor people understand it just fine? What if it is heavy people who understand that, you know what, there ain't nothing uniquely wrong with me, and the body I have is the body God gave me, and it's the body that's taking care of me. And if I eat well and exercise and take good care of myself, my body size might not always match it. And you are the one with your thin body who are smoking cocaine and smoking and taking shots and doing all these other things in order to be thin. That ain't healthy. If the fleas what if the fleas are not the people we think they are? I don't know. On my ride home yesterday, I was like, we need to turn the mirror around on who we think has a problem. At the end of my session yesterday, there was a gentleman who, after I said all of these things about the Flea story and learned helplessness and how everybody can have prejudice and everyone can have discrimination, but everybody is not exposed to glasses and lids and structures that kind of keep them down. This gentleman said, well, at what point does personal accountability come into play? And let me just be clear, accountability is the opposite of learned helplessness. I mean, the happiest people in the world are the ones who believe they have some agency in their lives. But what if all you have is money and you have nothing else? And you don't believe that you have agency to be able to share because you don't believe in growth mindset. You the one in the glass. That God made this thing so clear to me. It's like y'all think the fleas are the kids in underfunded schools, or the new hires with no social capital, the ones who we say this generation today, these folks need coaching and development, or the folks who we think don't know how to act in corporate spaces. But what if they're not? What if those of you who are in power are the ones who are the fleas? What if you are the one with the limiting belief? It reminds me, the gentleman yesterday, when he asked this question about basically saying that certain people just are lazy and don't try and just don't care and don't do well. I didn't have anything to say in that moment. What I did was refer him to the folks at REI, to tell him that there's a resource available, 2 days of this groundwater training. These folks are out of North Carolina. They do exceptional work. They helped me to see some of the spaces where I had some limiting beliefs and I needed to know better. But while I was thinking about the folks at REI, I thought about the exercise that they do at the end of that session. And if you choose to do the exercise, I don't want to ruin it for you. But the people in power that we say, are outside this glass, the things that they had to hold on to that they were proud of were money, were title, were the ability for the systems and structures to work for them. But everybody else had a level of pride around some very specific things. Music, art, culture, food, those things that make us human. And I would argue that if we're going to compare somebody to Flea, that it's not the folks who understand our greater humanity. And I think there's something for us to learn from the fact that Dr. C.H. Turner in 1910 when he did that experiment. I had no idea. I'd been telling this story for I don't know how long. I had no idea he was an old black man because that's how bias works, right? I'm an engineer. I happen to be black. And my mind did not see a 1910 black man with his doctorate studying insects other than ants and spiders. I maintain that while we are not funding schools, while we are closing healthcare clinics, while we are selling kids for cash and building privatized prisons, that the measure of our success is not money. It's how well we get out of this thing without destroying everyone else around us. And empathy, empathy is a critical component to that. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.